the interruption to your broadcast. My name is Marco Collins, and I'm here to announce the end of bad radio on this frequency.
It suddenly felt like Seattle was on the map in a way that it hadn't been before, and Marco was that megaphone.
Marco jumped out of the radio and made you take notice.
Hey, this is Eddie, and you're listening to Marco Collins.
Somebody said to me, oh, you'll learn how to play the game.
Plenty of sunshine through today.
I'm gonna learn how to play the game better.
He was kind of a rock star himself.
He was the on-off switch for your career.
Bands that come to mind that Marco broke.
Weezer.
President of the United States.
In the studio with me is Beck.
He was early on electronic music.
I have the Prodigy up next.
Hi, we are from Daft Punk.
Hi, this is Tom from the Chemical Brothers.
Marco wasn't scared to put his weight behind a track that he believed in.
Breaking the law! Breaking the law!
He's playing music that we're not allowed to hear.
You reach this sort of level of success, and pretty soon it all catches up with you.
The scene was very challenging to not get sucked into.
Other priorities took over, unfortunately.
I feel like I dropped the ball back then.
I mean, he's got many addictions, but his addiction to music is his life.
Not having a radio show is pushing me to invent me.
Marco is still out there taking a chance on new music. He is not resting on, like, I was really something in the 90s. You know, who the cares?
You gotta be willing to pioneer, and that's the story of Marco Collins.
Hey, Jeffrey, how you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. How are you? Thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love the background. Nicely.
Thank you. Yeah, there he's right there. I'm kind of covering him up. A fascinating documentary. You know what it reminds me of? When I was a kid, I saw a movie that nobody knows about. It's called American Hot Wax. Have you heard of this movie?
No.
Yeah, it's about Alan Freed, and he was the disc jockey who coined in Cleveland rock and roll, and he was very controversial. So I was kind of thinking, this is kind of like he's the Alan Freed of Seattle.
Yeah, that name came up a couple times. I'll have to check that film out. That sounds interesting.
But the thing is, this movie was over 7 years in the making. Tell me about the journey about getting this movie made, because it seems, for 7 years, there had to be challenges and obstacles. And
yeah, I think it was probably more like 5 years, because the idea came in 2011, and then it came out. It got released in 2016, so it's probably like 5 years from like idea to release. And it was my first film, so it's kind of one of those things where I just was so obsessed with making it and getting it done. And there were all kinds of challenges, usually lack of funds and resources is, the number one thing. And that's why it takes longer. Yeah, but it started in 2011. I was listening to a radio show on 107.7 The End in Seattle, and they were doing a 20-year anniversary of their station. It started in 1991. Good time to start. And they were counting down the top 107 songs in the history of the station and interviewing DJs from the station to tell kind of their best stories. And every time Marco came on, it was just like this great radio, and I was captivated. And right then I started thinking maybe I would write a script about 1991 Seattle with all these rock stars in the same place and this radio DJ that was right in the middle of it. That was the initial idea, that I'd write something. And I think I got like 10 pages in. Like, I think that day I started writing and was just kind of like, oh, I love this. It's Midnight in Paris had just come out. So I thought it was kind of like a bit of a take on that. And then when I was doing my research, I came across an article that had just come out like 2 weeks prior about Marco, a feature article about his rise and fall and his sexuality that he was navigating and all that. And that's when I kind of realized, like, okay, this is interesting. Like, this could be a documentary. And but yeah, I think we raised the first money like in 2013. So it was, in development for, almost probably like a year and a half before we finally got going on it.
What were some of the bands that he featured when he was a DJ? It's just, groundbreaking, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so early, right when he started, like literally the first record that landed on his desk was Nirvana, Nevermind. And he had been a fan of Nirvana on their previous album, Bleach, and played it on the radio at 91X in San Diego, but it didn't, take off or anything. But when he got this record, Smells Like Teen Spirit was the lead single, and he immediately played it 3 times in a row. And that introduced it to Seattle. And, that was maybe Nirvana and that song were inevitable, but somebody kind of put it the way, like he he took it past like maybe those first like a million purchases or whatever. Like he's the one that really, because he played it like crazy and he was so enthusiastic, that really took it to this next level that took over the world. And then of course, following them breaking out, you had Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains all broke out as well too. And he was the first one really playing all that on commercial radio. And then that allowed him, after that, everybody's looking to see what's Marco playing, and he played Weezer for the first time and Beck's Loser, and then after that he was instrumental in bringing electronic music to the United States. Like Daft Punk and Prodigy got their first plays on his show. And
Marco didn't agree to be in the film at first, did he? He was resisting?
Yeah, it took a while. I don't know if it was I think he liked the free lunches. We would have these like 3 or 4 hour meetings and just have like lunch and dinner. But it took about 6 months, and I think mostly he just really wanted to make sure that he was committed to it. Like he knew, he's an entertainer. He loves film. He loves indie film. And I think he realized that, okay, if I'm going to do this and it's going to be good, which why do it if it's not going to be, I'm going to have to really put myself out there. And he had to make sure he was okay with that. And even then, in the couple of years of making the film, we felt like we got like 95% there with him, but there was like this one little extra layer that if we could just peel back, that it would make the film stronger. And we did a final interview with him. Like, the film was pretty much cut. It wasn't done, but like we had the story, and we just realized we needed to go a little deeper. And there was an interview where he did that.
Well, he was like a rock star when he was at the station, but do you think he was the last DJ to become one? Because it's changed so much now.
Yeah, I think there's like Zane Lowe is a big name, but I don't think it can't be the same because everything's so fragmented. There's so many options that's dividing, people's attention. But at that time, you had commercial radio and you had MTV. And commercial radio in a place like Seattle, I think they had the bandwidth too, like that, they were being broadcast almost all over the state. But he had, I think at his peak, like 3 million people listening per night to his show. And you're not going to get that with radio. The numbers are,
that's huge. Yeah. That's
much less. So.
Yeah. If you had 500,000, they would go crazy,
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it can ever be that. Not to say that there's not other great personalities that are out there, but it's just, I think those times are gone where everybody's listening to this one guy's channel.
And the other side of this is the music. So what bands did you go after and who did you get for the documentary? Which was the most difficult?
Yeah. I really wanted to interview Eddie Vedder. Marco was the first to play him. It was his band, Bad Radio, in San Diego. So Eddie Vedder was was in San Diego in a band called Bad Radio. This is pre-Pearl Jam. Marco played him. So Eddie, we have audio saying, Marco is the first person to play me. And it seemed as if that interview was going to happen for a long time. And it just didn't happen. And then we felt, we can't wait forever. And then as far as the interviews that we did get that were challenging. The first one that comes to mind is like Shirley Manson from Garbage, not because she was challenging at all. She was amazing. Just her people didn't know that this was important to her. And, that was the biggest, that would have been the biggest challenge, is just like getting to the actual musician to make them aware of this request. Generally, your first email or call is to like a manager or a publicist or an agent, and they just are just like, no, they don't have time in their schedule. So we'd have to kind of go around. And I actually remember I think it was Shirley's manager that I got an email, drop the ball was his subject. And he was like, sorry, I dropped the ball on this. I didn't think she'd want to do it. And somehow she found out and was mad at me. And yeah, she wants to do it. So, and she was a great interview. So there was a lot of things like that. We just kind of had to figure out like how to get around the people that are paid to be gatekeepers.
And what I love about your documentary is this is a Seattle story at heart, because when you think of Seattle, you think of Starbucks, and you think of the Pikes Market and you think of grunge. You just think of those three things. I can't see the spacing without thinking of Nirvana or Pearl Jam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what attracted me to the story originally. And I had that Midnight in Paris idea. I don't know, 9 p.m. in Seattle, maybe didn't have ring the same bell, but I grew up in Washington State, and these were the first CD I ever had was Pearl Jam's 10. So, being a Seattle story and around the music that I loved growing up. And it's funny, I don't really listen to a lot of that now, but I have a 10-year-old son, and he's totally into rock and punk and grunge. And so It's hearing these a lot now coming from his room.
Well, I'm Generation X. I remember my college days at UNLV in the 90s, going to these alternative music stores where they sold CDs, finding Smashing Pumpkins, finding Pearl Jam, finding Weezer, finding all of those, and not hearing anything like that, because I'm coming out of, hair bands and electronic music, Devo and Boingo and stuff like that. Hearing Nirvana for the first time, it was a religious experience. It really was.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you mentioned Weezer. There's an interesting story with that. They were on David Geffen Company, DGC, and that they didn't have any expectations for that record. I mean, bands were getting, there was so much money at that time in music that bands would get record deals, and even good record deals, with no expectation from the label as far as like getting radio airplay or anything. They kind of maybe sign them like maybe their second or third record. Even Pearl Jam, their sales rep told a story about, she remembers that first record of theirs, the record label thought they aren't going to break on this record. It's going to maybe the next record. Let's slowly build an audience. And Even Flow was the song that she pitched to Marco, and Marco played it, and it went crazy right after Smells Like Teen Spirit. But then Weezer, same thing. There was no expectation. They didn't even have a lead single. Marco listened to it, loved the Sweater Song, and done the Sweater Song, played it, went to number one on his countdown, and that was that. I mean, so he had that ability at that time to Beck's Loser, somebody that worked for a different record label saw him playing at like a bar and bought his single and sent it to Marco, like, hey, I think you'll really like this. Puts it on. It was the song Loser that we still hear all the time today. And that was the first time Beck was ever played.
I think that's the last generation of genre of music where things like that could happen. Now it's like everybody promotes themselves on YouTube or whatever. But I mean, I think that was the last era where you could have the traditional discovery or record contract or something like that. I think that was a bygone era.
Yeah, I think so too. And then as far as, how Marco fits into all of it, he had his show at the time. That's how he was telling people about the music that he loved. But what I think is great about him is he doesn't have that big show, that big audience. He's got his social media, and that's what he's doing. He's just finding new music still and introducing it to people however he can. He wants people to know about this great new music. So it's, I don't know, it's pretty cool. I think that's what he'll do the rest of his life and maybe he'll have a show, maybe he'll have whatever platform he has, but he wants new music to be heard. And he just loves to share new music, good music.
I love flashbulb memories like that, because this is such an important part of American musical history. And you did a fascinating documentary of the guy who promoted it and embraced it and gave it to the world, essentially. So excellent job. And I appreciate you talking to me today about it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate that.
All right, man. Good luck with the documentary. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, take care.